Do you ever feel like you're worthy, but when the moment comes to act, you hesitate? Or maybe you're courageous, always taking actions, but deep down, you still question if you really matter?
Hello, and welcome to the Worthy Believer Show, where we choose to run after our courage and defeat self limiting barriers with faith, resilience, and biblical truth. Hey, I'm Delma Monica, a Christ follower, wife, mom, and former six-figure corporate leader turned entrepreneur and now podcaster. I firmly believe that following God's guidance leads to authentic freedom and our fullest potential. If you're ready to embrace fear, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and make being brave a habit, let's do it. Because our God is guiding us every step of the way. Come on, let's dive straight into it.
Welcome back to Worthy Believer. I'm your host, Delma Monica. I want to start today with a simple but powerful question. Do you ever feel like, you're worthy, but when the moment comes to act, you hesitate? Or maybe you're courageous, always taking actions, but deep down, you still question if you really matter. That tension between worth and courage, it's something that I've lived, and I think maybe many of you have too. So, worthiness and courage is like two sides of a coin, right? So, worthiness says, I'm enough, I belong. And courage says, I will step forward, I will try, even if I'm afraid, I'm going to go ahead and do this, shaking in my boots, right? So, today we're going to unpack what it means to live with both. So, we'll look at what happens when one is missing and how they fuel each other and how you can anchor your life and work while raising the cell of courage to move forward. So, my coffee's warm. I hope yours is too. Go grab that cup of coffee and let's walk through this together. Okay, so let's start with worthiness. As I said earlier, worthiness it's going to be a focus of discussion today. Worthiness is not about accomplishments. It's not about how much money you make. It's not about the title you hold at work or how many people follow you on social media. Worthiness is about identity. It's the unshakable truth that you were created with value. Now, if you want to look at it from a biblical aspect, in Psalms 139, it says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, I kept it really short, but that's a declaration of worth. It doesn't say, I'll be worthy when I finally fix X or this about myself, or I'll be worthy once I reach this particular milestone. It says you already are. Now, here's the challenge. Many of us nod our heads at this but struggle to live like this, right? I've worked with people who knew, at least in their minds, that they were valuable. I've also seen people at church as well, whenever I have these day to day interactions, but their daily choices said otherwise. Maybe they kept saying yes to everyone, even when their plate was full. Maybe they stayed silent when they should have spoke up, all because they didn't feel that they deserved to take up space. So that's what I want to encourage you to do is take up that space, right? I'll share from my own life. There was a time in my career where I was burning out, not because of the work itself, not because the work felt impossible or the tasks or the things that I was working on seemed impossible, but because I kept tying my worth to productivity. If I wasn't constantly producing something and I wasn't constantly proving, I felt less valuable. And I think that's a trap that many of us fall into. Well, worthiness calls us to like pause and remember, you don't need to hustle for value. You don't need to beg for permission to exist. You are already worthy. Take a second right now and say it quietly to yourself. I am worthy. Now, let's shift to courage. If worthiness is about identity, courage is about action. Courage says, I'm afraid, but I'll move anyway. I'm going to do it shaking in my boots. Let's get started. Let's do this, right? Now, from a biblical aspect, it's in Joshua 1:9 says, be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, notice that courage doesn't erase fear. Courage doesn't mean you suddenly feel confident. It means you act, trusting that God and the one who you are and the person you are is enough to carry you forward. It's really walking in truth and aligning yourself with truth. Now think about times in your own life where you needed to be courageous. Maybe it was speaking up in a meeting even when your voice was shaking. Maybe it was having a hard conversation with someone you love. The hard conversations, right? Maybe it was deciding to finally pursue a dream that you've kept hidden in your heart and you were scared to share with someone, and then you decide to take that first step. One story from my own life is I remember a moment when I needed to give feedback to someone in a position of authority. Everything in me wanted to stay quiet and not say anything. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I didn't want to disappoint people. I thought, who am I to challenge them? What if I look foolish? But courage nudged me to move forward. And you know what? That conversation didn't just go well, it built trust. Courage created growth for me. And so, if worthiness is about knowing you deserve to be in the room, courage is about actually raising your hand to speak, to move forward, to say something and step out and do it. So, here's where the two meet. Think of it like this: worthiness is an anchor, courage is the sail. You need both. An anchor keeps you steady, right? It reminds you who you are so you don't drift every time the wind changes. But an anchor alone won't move the boat. For that, you need the sail. The sail catches the wind and moves you forward. Let me give you a few comparisons. So, worthiness is about being, courage is about doing. Worthiness says, I belong. Courage says, I'll go. Worthiness anchors you in truth. Courage carries you into growth. Now imagine living with only one. If you only live with worthiness, you know you're valuable. But if you never step forward, you'll stay anchored in the same spot and you won't move. You'll avoid risk, but you'll also miss out on growth. On the other hand, if you only live with courage, you take bold steps, but you don't believe that you're worthy. You're constantly going to be hustling for approval. You'll be on the brink of burning out in the process or whatever it is that you're working on. The sweet spot is when the two work together. So worth reminds you that you belong. Courage moves you to live like it. Let's talk about an example. A woman at the well, right? A woman who knows her worth. She deserves respect, but courage is what leads her to actually negotiate for a raise. A young man knows his worth. He's created in God's image, but courage is what helps him share his faith with a friend. Okay. Now you've got anchor and you've also got sell, and you need both. So let's talk about what happens when one is missing, right? So without worth, you fall into insecurity, you people please, you burn out because you're always trying to earn or you're always trying to prove yourself, and it's really already been given to you. You can stay silent when your voice matters. And that's not really, I think, something that we're wanting, right? So without courage, you stagnate, you dream, but you never act. You stay in the comfort zones, you replay the what if scenario in your mind, and then you end up with regret. Both are dangerous, both leave you unfulfilled. But the beauty is, God has given us both. In Christ, you are already declared worthy. And by his spirit, you are empowered with courage. So let's talk about worth and courage together, right? I want to bring this with a story. Now, there was a season where I knew that I needed to make a change in my own life. On paper, I was doing fine. People would look at me and think I had it together. But inside, I was totally restless. I knew I was meant for more. It took worthiness to say, I don't need to keep proving myself through this role or through these achievements or through these actions or trying to meet this milestone. That was the anchor. But it took courage to take the step to have the conversations, to make the shifts, to risk the unknown. And maybe you're there right now. Maybe you know deep down you are worthy, but courage is missing. Or maybe you're bold and courageous, but you don't feel like you're enough. And so even your courage leaves you feeling exhausted. Here's the truth: you need both. And when they come together, they don't just add up, they multiply. Worth gives you the why, courage gives you the how. Now, again, looking at it from a scriptural standpoint, in Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." That's worth and courage working side by side. So let's recap. Worth says you are enough. Courage says step forward anyway. Together they create a life where you can rise with truth and live without limits. I want to leave you with two questions. First one is, where do you need to anchor in worth this week? And two, where do you need to raise the sail of courage? So take some time to write this down. If you're running, reflect through it. Maybe share it with a friend. Talk through it. Leave a comment on my Facebook page. Leave a comment on my podcast. So if today's episode encouraged you, share it with someone. Leave, as I said earlier, a podcast review and comment. I'd love to hear how this episode resonated with you and how worth and courage are showing up in your life today. And as usual, remember, when you rise with worth and you step forward in courage, you can truly become limitless. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I'll see you in the next episode.
If you found this podcast helpful, make sure to leave a good review. Thank you.